Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Kristen and this is All the Stories. Today I will be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. I love this tag, I love watching this tag, and even before I started my booktube channel, this was like one of my favorite tag videos to watch other people do, so I'm super excited to be doing it myself this year. And before I hop into the questions, I wanted to thank everyone who's new here, because since I posted my last video, I think I've gained like 30 subscribers. I went from like 60 to 90. So thank you so much for subscribing to me. Welcome to all the new people watching my videos. And let's hop into these questions for this tag. Okay, I kind of want to say, since I am filming this like at the beginning of July and I have finished like 2 books in July, I'm only going to be talking about the books that I read from January through June, because those are the first 6 months of the year, the mid-year, whatever. So from January to June, I read 93 books this year, so super exciting. My goal for the year was 100, so like I'm literally almost there. So I guess I'm gonna up that maybe to 150, 200, I don't know if I'm gonna 200, maybe 150. I read 93 books at the mid-year, and it's been a pretty good reading year so far. I read a lot of 5 stars. I read some not so 5 stars. So first question on this tag is, what has been your favorite book so far in 2019? I've kind of narrowed it down to 2 books that I'm stuck between. I think I'm just going to pick one. So the book that I choose for this answer would be City of Brass by S.A. I'm going to put the book here so you can see her name, because I feel like I butcher it every time I try to say it. So this has been my favorite book of the year so far. I bought City of Brass last year, and it's just sat on my shelf for a while. And then I realized that the second book was coming out in January. So in January, I was like, okay, before the second book comes out, I'm going to read this first book. And I was blown away. I loved the book. I loved the characters. I loved all the political maneuvering and intrigue and stuff. I loved the relationships between the characters. I just loved everything about it. So yeah, I think I'm going to pick that. I did also read the second book. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to go with. I do have a couple of other books that were like neck and neck with City of Brass, but I picked them for other questions. I will be talking about them later in this tag, and I will give them a shout out that they were on the list for best book and kind of neck and neck with City of Brass. But for the sake of only picking one answer per question and trying not to repeat books, I will be choosing City of Brass as my favorite book. And if you don't know, this is a Middle Eastern inspired fantasy series about this girl who summons this magical warrior. As she's kind of like jokes around and makes a fake ceremony out of it, but she accidentally summons this magical mythical warrior and ends up going to this magical city where she is sucked into all the political maneuverings that are going on within this city. And it's just so good. I highly recommend it. Obviously, it was my favorite book that I read this year so far. So the third and final book in this series will be coming out next year in 2020. So go ahead and do yourself a favor and read City of Brass and the second book. So the question number 2 is, what is the best sequel that you've read this year? And I just realized that this is kind of repeating, but I don't care. My best sequel has been The Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Someone in the comments, please tell me how to say her name, because I feel so bad when this is my favorite book of the year and I can't say her name. And Kingdom of Copper is by far, not actually by far, I've read some great sequels this year, but Kingdom of Copper has been my favorite of the year so far. It was amazing. It kept up. It did not suffer from second book syndrome like a lot of sequels do. It was just as good as the first one, and it made me it left on that ending. It left on an ending where I just need the third book in my life right now. So question number 3 is a new release that you haven't yet. Question number 3 is a new release that you haven't read yet but want to. The book that I'm picking for this is We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faizal. I'm sorry if I'm saying this one wrong as well, but We Hunt the Flame is a book that I recently bought, and I can't wait to read. I've heard great things about it. I'm super excited. The synopsis sounds great. So this book follows two main characters. One is a female character who disguises herself as a man and is known as the Hunter, and she is very revered by the people. The other is a prince who is an assassin who kills people for his father, the king. She goes out looking for this mystical object, and the prince is sent out to find this object as well and also to kill her. And this just sounds so good. I've heard such great reviews on it. I cannot wait to read it. Question number 4 is, what are your most anticipated releases for the second half of the year? And I have so many answers for this question. I'm gonna try to keep it concise and not pick everything that's on my TBR, but I'm gonna stick to these 5 answers instead of the 10, 20, 30, 40 books that I am anticipating the second half of the year. So first and foremost, if I had to pick one answer for this question, without a doubt, it would be Dark Dawn by Jay Kristoff. I'm so ready for Dark Dawn. Nevernight is like one of my favorite books. God's Grave is one of my favorite books. This series is one of my favorite series, and I am so hyped for November when, I said November. I'm so hyped for September when this book comes out. Dark Dawn, I pre-ordered it. I pre-ordered the Waterstones edition with the black sprayed edges. I can't wait, you guys. This book is going to be everything. I already feel it. I already know it, and I'm excited for it. Another book that I can't wait for is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, who is the author of The Night Circus, which I also read this year. That's a lie. I read The Night Circus last year. But The Night Circus, which is a book that I really enjoyed, and I read the synopsis for The Starless Sea, and it sounds so interesting. Book number 3 I'm anticipating is one that the author kind of did me dirty because it was supposed to come out in March, and then she moved it back to like July, and then she moved it back again, and now it's coming out in December. So it's something that I should have already read, but it's okay. She had to do what she had to do to make the book great, and I understand. But that book is Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Tomi Adeyemi, which is the sequel to Children of Blood and Bones. And that was one of my favorite books that I read last year, so I can't wait to continue on with this series. Next book I'm anticipating is The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black, which is the conclusion to I think it's called the Folk of the Air series, which is The Cruel Prince and the Wicked King, and now The Queen of Nothing. And The Queen of Nothing comes out in November. Super excited for that. The last book that's on my most anticipated list is Supernova by Marissa Meyer, which is the final book in the Renegades trilogy. I think the trilogy is just called the Renegades trilogy. So we go from the highs to the lows, from most anticipated to question number 5, which is your most disappointing read of the year. This was not hard at all. Without a question, my most disappointing read of the year was Ashante by Gina Trelease. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm not gonna make myself angry on here. We're not gonna talk about it. I'm just gonna let you know. It wasn't the worst book I read this year. Probably. I think that's the book that's the worst. But even if it wasn't the worst, it's definitely my most disappointing because I was anticipating this book. I saw the cover last year and I was like, oh, that's really pretty. I heard the synopsis. I said, oh, that sounds interesting. French Revolution meets fantasy. And I was so let down. Like, the book, I almost DNF'd it. The only reason I didn't DNF it was because I was reading it for a book club and I wanted to finish it so I could watch the live show. But 10 out of 10 definitely would have DNF'd it if it wasn't for that live show, because I was having problems. Even with the fact that I went to watch the live show, I was still planning on DNFing it. I low-key did DNF it, but then the next morning I was like, no, I'm gonna finish it. So I picked it back up after I decided to DNF it. And also, I thought that was a standalone, and I found out now it's a series. So definitely not reading the next one. Like, it's a no for me. It's a whole no for me. But I was anticipating it and it let me down. Question number 6 is your biggest surprise of the year. Y'all, I have 2 answers for this, and they're surprises for 2 different reasons. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is like my actual biggest surprise of the year, and that is Alex Approximately by Jean Bennett. I went into this book with 0 expectations. I had never read a Jean Bennett book before. I'd heard that she was a popular author for contemporaries, and I saw the book on Book Outlet, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna pick it up. And I picked this book up last year, and it just sat on my shelf for a long time. I bought this last year, and I picked this up in January. I read this in January, and this book had been sitting on my shelf for like 6 months, and I was going out of town, so I just picked a book at random kind of off my shelf and threw it in my bag to read in the car, because it was like a 3-hour car ride there and a 3-hour back. So I was like, okay, I already was in the middle of the book, so I just threw this one in there like, okay, in case I finish my book, here's just another book to randomly just read. And you guys, 5 out of 5 stars. This is also one of the books that I was considering for my favorite book that I've read so far this year, like the best book that I've read so far. I was strongly considering this. I gave this 5 stars. This is the first contemporary that I've ever given 5 stars, and I loved this. This book was so good to me. I don't know what it was about it. I couldn't articulate it to you. I couldn't describe it, but I just couldn't put it down. Like, I could not put this book down when I was reading it. I found the plot interesting. I found the characters interesting. I found the romance interesting. I found the plot. I loved it, and I couldn't believe how much I loved this book. If I had been told before the year started that this would be one of my favorite reads of the year, I would have been like, really? It is definitely my new favorite contemporary. Definitely love this book with all my soul, and I could tell I loved it because I never just like immediately want to reread something, but I immediately wanted to reread this, and I've been putting it off forever because I was like, no, I need to read something new. I literally read this book like 4 or 5 months ago. I don't need to reread it, but guess who's rereading this book this month? I'm rereading this book this month for the challenge. I'm participating in the Book Junkie Trials, and one of the challenges is reread a favorite book, and so your girl was picking this book up again because I can. The second book that I'm picking for biggest surprise, because I couldn't not include this book in this video, because this book was my last pick that was on the 3-way tie for best book, was this book, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book was a surprise, and it wasn't at the same time, because I loved The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo last year. It was one of my favorite reads, so I'm not surprised that I like this book, but yet it was a surprise because I was not hyped for this book. I knew this book was coming out. I wasn't even really planning on reading it like right away. When it came out, I was kind of just like, whatever. But then I started hearing all the good reviews about it, so I was like, you know what, I guess I'm gonna pick it up. And then also it was the bookmarked book of the month, and I wanted to participate in the book club, so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna pick it up and read it, whatever. And oh my God, I listened to the audiobook, and it just took my soul. Like, I listened to it in one day. I could not stop listening to it. It was amazing, and I could not put it down. And the reason it was a surprise for me was because the plot didn't sound interesting to me. I don't really like rock and roll. I don't like 70s, 80s rock music. Doesn't appeal to me, not my taste. And a book that follows a fictional band, a 70s rock band, didn't sound interesting to me. Like, it just didn't. But so glad I picked this up. So glad I listened to the audiobook and read along physically, because perfection. Number 7 is your favorite new author, and this could be a debut author or a new to you author, and that will be Jean Bennett, because after I read this book, I picked up almost everything she's ever wrote. I read this, and then I found out that she was coming out with a new book, and I want to say that was April, May, whenever Serious Moonlight came out. So I picked up Serious Moonlight, and I read that too, and I didn't like it as much as this. I think I gave Serious Moonlight 4 stars, but it was still a good contemporary. And then last month I also picked up Starry Eyes by Jean Bennett. So I read 3 of her books so far, and love. She's one of my new favorite contemporary authors, because even her ones that I didn't like as much as this one, I still liked. The order of the books I've read, if you're just interested, definitely number 1 was Alex Approximately, number 2 was Starry Eyes, and number 3 was Serious Moonlight. And I'm super excited for her new book that's coming out. Well, actually, she actually has a fantasy coming out at the end of this year, which is also one of my anticipated books, so I'm super excited to read that, because I want to see how as a contemporary author, she handles a fantasy, and I hope I love it as much as I like her contemporaries. And I'm super excited because next year she's coming out with another contemporary that's called Saving Lucky, I think. I could be wrong about that title. I think it's called Saving Lucky, and the synopsis for that sounds amazing. So Jean Bennett is definitely one of my new favorite authors, and I will read anything that she writes. Next question is your newest fictional crush. My contemporary crush is Daniel from The Sun Is Also a Star. I read that book this year and love. Another book that I finished in a day because I couldn't put it down, and I'm so shocked that I've never picked up this book before because I had read everything by Nicola Yoon, and I liked that. It just wasn't like love, but I loved The Sun Is Also a Star. Super excited, and Daniel was just the sweetest thing ever, so he's my new fictional crush if I had to pick one. So question number 9 is your newest favorite character, and for this I'm gonna go with a pretty recent read. I read this towards the end of last month, and that is Daisy from the book Royals by Rachel Hawkins, or recently rebranded as Prince Charming by Rachel Hawkins. And this book was another one that kind of surprised me. Like, I really liked this book. I read this in a day as well. My newest favorite character would probably be Daisy, who is the main character in this book. Her wit, her sense of humor completely matches my sense of humor, and she's one of those people that just has such a sarcastic sense of humor, which anyone who knows me would totally agree is my sense of humor. So stuff that she was saying would literally make me laugh, and it was just a good time just being in her head. She just reminds me of me. So she's my newest favorite character out of all the books that I've read recently. I just loved the humor in this book. Question number 10 is a book that made you cry, and I'm not a person that cries in books. I have yet to cry in a book. I've been close to tears in a book, and not saying books don't make me sad. When sad things happen, of course I get sad, but I'm just not a crier. I don't cry in books. I don't cry in movies. I get choked up, but I don't cry. But for that, so I'm kind of just gonna go with the book that got me close to tears because it was sad. There were some sad things happening in this book, but it was so good. And that is, I went blank on the title. And that is A List of Cages by Robin Rowe. You guys, this book is sad. Like, there was a part in this book that is so sad that I was literally sitting there dying on the inside. And with that being said, this is a phenomenal book. This is an amazing book. I heard people talking about this book last year on BookTube, but I just never, picked it up. And then I think I saw this on Book Outlet one day, and I was like, oh, that's that book people were talking about. And I bought it, and it was another one that sat on my shelf for a little while, but finally picked it up in February, and it did actually have me pretty close to tears. The whole book is sad, but there was this one part that just hits you in the gut, and you're just like, oh my god. So if you've read this book, I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about, but be prepared to cry. Trigger warnings for this book are through the roof. There's some sexual abuse, trigger warning for child abuse, trigger warning for mental abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, just trigger warnings for all of that. It was a rough ride, but it was definitely worth it. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. Going on to the opposite of that, a book that made me happy was The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. This book just put such a smile on my face. I was just so happy reading it. And I read this during February when I was trying to read more books by authors of color. It's an adult romance, so there is some smut. I had such a blast reading this one. I was just living life to my fullest when I was reading this book, and it just made me smile. So if you're looking for a good adult romance, here you go. Question number 12 is the most beautiful book you've bought or received this year, and without a doubt, 100%, the most beautiful book that I got this year has to be With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. You guys, first off, the outside of this book is gorgeous. Look at it. She beautiful. The spine of this book is gorgeous. The ombre is beautiful. The back of this book is gorgeous. Then, when you undress the book, the underside of this book, the actual cover of this book is gorgeous. Look at this. Why aren't all books like this? Why don't people do this more? Like, look at this. It's gorgeous. Chef's kiss. Gorgeous. And that's actually appropriate for this book because our main character wants to be a chef. So look what I just did. Gorgeous, this book. Even if you don't want to read this book, just buy it and take the cover off and just have it sitting on your shelf like this because it's gorgeous. And last but not least, the final question. Question number 13 is, what books do you have to read by the end of the year? So for me, just insert all the books that I mentioned for question number 4, which was new releases for the second half of the year that you can't wait for. Insert all of those books for this question, but also some books that I already own that are on my shelf that I have to read by the end of the year are number 1, Aurora Rising by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. This book is a new release and I've heard good things, but I just haven't gotten around to reading it yet. I love me some Jay Kristoff, as you've heard before when I was talking about Nevernight and God's Grave and Dark Dawn. But I'm excited to read this. Sci-fi isn't really my thing, which is kind of why I've been putting off picking this book up because I'm not a big sci-fi person. So I've just been reading other things. But I am super excited to get to this. I also need to get to, it's on the shelf, so I guess I'll pull it out. Just talking about Aurora Rising made me think of it. I also need to get to Lifelike by Jay Kristoff, which is another book. I just want to read everything he's published, but I've been putting this one off as well because this is also sci-fi, and I'm just not in the sci-fi mood, so I just haven't read either one of these, but I really hope to get to both of these by the end of the year. And last but not least, I want to get to Thunderhead by the end of the year by Neil Shusterman, because the last book in this series, I think it's called The Toll. So the last book in the Arc of Scythe series comes out towards the end of this year as well. I think it comes out in November. I really want to get to this, so when the last book comes out, I'll be ready to read it. I read Scythe a couple of months ago for the Bookmark Book Club. I can't remember what month. I think it was like May-ish. But anyway, I read Scythe and I really enjoyed it, and I just haven't gotten around to picking up Thunderhead yet, so I really want to get to that and then hopefully read Toll as well. So that is it for the mid-year book freakout tag. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!